Well, on that note, on that sage advice, thank you so much for that. And please keep this energy going. You know, this is very demonstrative of the excitement that we all have for teaching and learning. And keep it going throughout your tracks, and we'll see you again at the reception. So in the meantime, we're going to introduce our very esteemed roundtable. It's being moderated by John Ishiyama. This is the 10th anniversary roundtable on the impact of the American Political Science Association Teaching and Learning Conference. John Ishiyama is a former council member. He's the University Distinguished Research Professor of Political Science and the lead editor of the American Political Science Review. And he teaches at the University of North Texas. Next we have Dr. Linda Lopez. She's the Associate Dean of Diversity and Strategic Initiatives at the University of Southern California, and she's the former Director of Education, Professional, and Minority Programs at the American Political Science Association. Next we have Fletcher Mcclellan. Dr. Mcclellan is Professor of Political Science and the Dean of Faculty at Elizabethtown College. And sitting next to him on his left, we have Michelle Deardorff. Dr. Deardorff is Chair and Professor of Political Science at the Hammond Institute at Jackson State University. She's also Chair of the American Political Science Committee on Teaching and Learning. And next to Michelle, we have Carlos Huerta. Professor Huerta is at Texas A&M, Corpus Christi. He is a current member of the APSA Council, Professor of Political Science and Director of the University Core Curriculum Programs at Texas A&M, Corpus Christi. He's also Secretary-Treasurer of the Southwestern Political Science Association. To his left, we have Dr. Candace Young. She is a professor at Truman State University and also the current chair of the APSA Teaching and Learning Conference Program Committee, as well as chair of the Assessment Working Group, which is a group that was tasked with studying the status of assessment within the discipline, and they will be coming out with a survey soon. And then on the end, we have Kerstin Hamann. Kerstin Hamann is a former vice president of the American Political Science Association Council. She's also a professor and chair of the Department of Political Science at the University of Central Florida and is the current editor-in-chief for the Journal of Political Science Education. So let's welcome our panel.
Well, I have been roped into doing this by Kim, and I can never say no, so that's why she keeps asking. But I am very honored to be asked to moderate this panel today, which really commemorates the 10th anniversary of the Teaching and Learning Conference. And you know, when you think about it, 10 years is a long time. And also, I really can't believe 10 years have passed. And you know, I really can't believe it because I was looking at a picture of myself 10 years ago, and my beard was black. I had more hair, and I think I was a little bit taller then. So I can't really believe what I see today, but it's really a great thing to see all of you today at the conference. I do want to start by, I want to recognize a friend of ours who's been around for a long time, John Berg. And John, you've been around since even before the Teaching and Learning Conference. I remember when the section used to be called the undergraduate education section, and we had section meetings of 4 people. And I think it was you, and then me, and then Michelle, and then somebody else, I forget. But oh, Grant, yeah, Grant Rear. But so, you know, John, when you step up, I want to give you a hand, okay? And John was also there 10 years ago in that little room at American University where 40 of us first attended the first Teaching and Learning Conference. So I don't think we ever thought it would turn into this. Today we have 6 individuals, all of whom were at the first conference at American University some 10 years ago. And we've asked them to speak about some issues that I think to share some of their experiences. Our first speaker is Linda Lopez, who was at that time Education Director, and a bunch of other things. I have forgotten what the title was, Linda, I'm sorry.
I forgot too.
Yeah, it's been a while. But Linda was really very instrumental in helping put together that very first meeting. So we've asked her to say a few words about that first meeting and reflect upon that. Then our next speaker, Fletcher Mcclellan. Well, our next group of speakers, Fletcher Mcclellan, Carlos Huerta, and Kirsten Hamann, and Candy Young will be talking about the things that, the most important things that we can derive from the Teaching and Learning Conference. What impact has it made in our discipline? And then we'll finish off with Michelle Deardorff, who's going to talk a little bit about what is the future of political science education in our profession and our association. So that's all I'm going to say because I have no other opinion. So I'm going to turn it over to Linda.
Can I just?
Yeah, you can just sit there.
Okay. Can all of you hear me? Okay, great. So I'm really happy to be here. It's been 10 years since this conference started, and one of the things that I always look forward to is to see friends that I haven't seen in a very long time. And today I was asked to speak a little bit about the creation of the conference and what the impetus was for creating it. And I think to contextualize it, there were a lot of things going on at the time that we were thinking about creating this conference. And so I want to set the context a little bit before I get moving to how it all got started. So the first thing that came to mind when I was reflecting on what I was going to say today is that there was a time, during the time that we started thinking about this conference, I think at the association level there was a lot of significant changes happening. The first thing that I remember is leadership and the role that leadership played in our executive council and how that was really changing, that it was really changing in the sense that there were institutions that were starting to be represented from a lot of different, a diversity of institutions, an array of institutions, so research intensive, institutions that are more teaching oriented, hybrids, etc. And so I think that was number one, that there was a lot of things that were really changing at the associational level, as well as the issues of leadership, issues of representation, and there were general discussions about, who should be represented on that council. At the same time, I think there was a notion or an idea that at the higher education level, at the university level, that there were significant changes happening as well at the time with serious discussions on issues focused on learning outcomes. How do we understand whether or not our students are actually learning what we teach them, as well as what skills are required, what kinds of things we want them to learn. And so I think it was during a time when there was also, outside of our own institutions, general discussions about the role and place of learning and teaching, which is still ongoing, of course, but I think during that time, learning outcomes became this really big area of exploration. And so it was a great opportunity, I think, for us to inwardly look at the association and the role that faculty and members in our association could think about political science education, and how APSA as an organization, we talked about organizational structure and institutional change, how APSA as an organization could develop a space for political science faculty to have specific dialogues and conversations about very important teaching and learning issues. I should note, too, that historically the association has had a lot of different standing committees. We've had different infrastructure within the association focused largely on issues of civic education and curriculum. But I think what's really unique and novel about this conference and what brings all of us together is that we've expanded that to include issues and practices that focus on, the role of simulations, the role of civic education, the role of technology, which is increasingly something that we navigate in our classrooms, and the list goes on, and it's reflected, I think, in the program as well. So how did this all get started? I think, and Michael could probably share, Michael Britnall was definitely a leader in this. We had a lot of internal discussions at the staff level, at the association, and also thinking about how we could bring a diverse array of institutions and faculty together to focus specifically on certain themes and best practices that could be shared widely. And so we started off with a program committee because that's how things get started. We selected specific faculty, some of whom are on this panel today, to think about the models that could be used in this conference. And so when I think back and pinpoint, what made this conference possible,
there are several things that come to mind. The first is that the timing was right. So we did develop an organizational structure through a standing committee that helped us think about ideas, that helped us think about the model that we would use, because this conference is really unique in the sense that this working group model is something that we had considered. But there were a lot of kinks and a lot of challenges in creating that in the beginning, and so we did start it off in that way. And from what I understand, it's still the model that is used. So I think there's definitely a precedent for it and a general understanding that it actually works. So I'm really happy about that, because we really weren't sure whether or not it would work, but I guess it's still in existence, so hopefully it still works for you. And for those of you who haven't been to the conference, it's a wonderful way of really thinking critically about some of the issues that you're dealing with in the classroom and also sharing these best practices. The second thing I think to pinpoint, what created, sort of the impetus for all of this is, I think, a general excitement by political science faculty to really find a place within the organization that focused on teaching, that focused on methods, that focused on core areas for further development, and also, I think, a more responsive APSA to the needs of political science educators, because that's really at the core of what we do. So we all do research, we also do teaching, and I think that's really part of the core of what we do as a profession. The third thing I think is a more inclusive APSA, and I think in reflecting back, political science had become more inclusive of faculty that did come from a diverse set of institutions, and we see this now, of course, in our leadership structure at the council level and beyond. So I think that's a positive thing for those of us who are in the classroom and who are thinking about these teaching and learning themes, not just for today and for tomorrow, but for the future. And also a group of APSA faculty leaders that were committed to making sure that teaching and learning issues were at the forefront of APSA's culture. So kind of thinking about organizational change, those impacts really led to, I think, a change in perception, a change in thought, a change in a commitment to certain values that we, are committed to through our professional careers. And so what were the impacts? I think number one is the organizational structure that is now embedded in APSA through the conference, because it really speaks to addressing certain needs that our faculty really are interested in pursuing and really interested in developing. The second thing is I look at it more from a leadership development standpoint, and it provides an opportunity, I think now, also for faculty to get some training, to also develop social networks across different types of institutions, and really thinking about these issues in a very critical way. So I do see more stronger faculty connections around successful teaching and learning practices, but also some of the challenges that are faced in the classroom, because there are definite challenges. So in closing, I believe the conference does represent the collective efforts of all of you to continue to mobilize to improve teaching and learning in political science. So I want to thank you for inviting me, John, to the panel. So thank you.
Good afternoon. The Teaching and Learning Conference has had a significant impact on our discipline, and there are many impacts that we could discuss. I'm going to focus on community. This conference has been instrumental in forging a community of teachers, scholars who are enthusiastic about teaching and learning, and this has happened in several ways. First, the TLC was formed around a sense of mission, to bring political scientists together to discuss ways to better promote learning of knowledge, skills, and dispositions that will make our students effective citizens and positive contributors to their professions and communities. This student-centered focus has attracted hundreds and hundreds of faculty members and graduate students whose primary job is teaching. As a result, conference participation at the TLC is different than what you find at the annual APSA meeting. Small colleges, regional universities, and community colleges offering mainly associate, bachelor's, and master's degrees are highly represented here. People here are passionate about teaching and are eager to talk about what they do to try to reach students and to try to turn them on to the workings of politics and government as we are. People here are also passionate about the scholarship of teaching and learning, which they see as equal in importance to traditional scholarship, or the scholarship of discovery, as Ernest Boyer put it. This brings me to the second way that the TLC has promoted community. In the beginning, many TLC participants felt estranged from APSA, which they saw as dominated by faculty from Research 1 institutions whose lives were really unconnected to professors teaching 3, 4, 5, and even more courses a semester. Many of us pursued teaching scholarship only to find this work derided as second-rate. So for much of the first 10 years, there has been kind of an outsider vibe to this conference. An us versus them feeling, which, healthy or not, has ironically contributed to community. Third, the use of the working group model, as Linda mentioned, sustaining dialogue on a topic of common interest for the entire conference and from one conference to the next, has promoted collaboration and in development of track summaries, joint projects among track members, and the occasional breakthrough in understanding and practice. It has fostered lasting relationships. Interestingly, sub-communities have evolved from this group format. I went to the trouble of reading most of the track summaries that have been published in the last 10 years. It wasn't much trouble at all. And discovered that different tracks have not only different substantive and pedagogical concerns, but also different personalities, so to speak. For example, the general education core curriculum track has always had an underdog, even subversive quality to it. as if the members were mad scientists, plotting ways to convince their faculty colleagues and administrators back home that political science really is the indispensable discipline, which it is. I'm glad we all agree on that. The assessment track has morphed from discussing why are we doing outcomes assessment to how can we do it in a way that suits the needs of our students in our program. This group, with which I've been associated over the years, has served as cheerleaders, proclaiming the benefits of assessment to anyone who will listen. You see, the spinach is good for you. One group that appears perennially frustrated is the teaching research methods track. For years, their track summaries ask questions like, why won't anyone agree with us that research methods is central to an undergraduate political science curriculum? Why is methods so disconnected from that curriculum? Why do students hate us? As I said, a lot of frustration there. Thinking more broadly, what impresses me about the track summaries is the high level of seriousness each group displays. You do get a feeling that bonding takes place in every track every year. And along with the earnest pleas that each track makes to the discipline, you find the occasional sharp observation. Now, here's an example commenting on the slow process of motivating colleagues to focus more attention on issues of diversity and inequality. The members of that track said that there could be greater progress if institutions funded the creation of diversity-related courses with the same zeal that they exhibited in supporting the development of online learning. Ouch. Of course, it is difficult to separate the effects of the TLC on community from other developments that have taken place over the last decade or even longer. The TLC is closely connected to the political science education section, which has grown over the years under John's leadership and Michelle's. Out of these interactions have come short courses on assessment, active teaching, and getting jobs at teaching institutions, monographs on assessment and civic engagement, newly published and available at popular prices, the Journal Political Science Education, and countless other scholarly collaborations. I think of the TLC as the connective tissue across all these efforts, providing us with that midwinter opportunity to gather, discuss, dream, and plan our next assaults on the powers that be. Which brings me finally to this observation. The outsiders have become the insiders. More than a few of those who started the TLC, including some on this panel, have risen to positions of influence in APSA. We have fabulous relations with Michael and the APSA staff and many in the Research One world who support and participate in these efforts. We look forward to the annual APSA meetings. We have met the powers that be, and they is us. Others among us have assumed leadership positions within our own institutions. I don't know about you, but I have colleagues at Elizabethtown who look at political science with awe. How are you guys so far ahead on outcomes assessment? You what? Your professional association sponsors a national conference devoted solely to teaching and learning? When you go back, can you bring us back some stuff that can help us? And so the community of teacher scholars that this conference has cultivated is growing. It grows as new tracks are added. It grows as international scholars and graduate students and community college faculty join us. It grows as we pass the message to our colleagues at our home institutions. And the message is this: the scholarship of teaching and learning counts. It counts because it is serious research. It counts because it is saving the discipline from those who believe that social science research has no practical effects. And most importantly, the scholarship of teaching and learning counts because it is making a difference in the lives of our students. Thank you.
It's going to be a tough act to follow, Fletcher. Can you all hear okay? Is this one on? We weren't the first time we've used this one. Okay. You know, I was thinking these comments I was going to make today. I really had to think back about, you know, it hit me 10 years. That's, well, that is a while. And John touched on that. And so, you know, John mentioned the gray beard. My wife got this new digital camera, and she took this picture. And I happened to be looking at the, you know, the things in there to see what it was. And so, well, who's this guy? And it's this older guy. And I thought, that's me. You know, so you know, things have changed. I still thinking of myself from 10 years ago. I was at that first meeting. Things have changed. Fletcher, I like that. Shout out to the core curriculum panel. That was my idea a couple of years ago on the program committee, so I'm glad we're rebels. So when I was thinking about this again, like the comments from Linda and Fletcher, I see some changes. I'm talking about accomplishments at 3 levels. I think about changes with the association, the American Political Science Association. I think about accomplishments with our discipline, political science, and also accomplishments of individuals as they've had a chance to grow professionally and become leaders in political science, in the American Political Science Association, of course, on their campuses as well. I think for the association, the real key here is a space in our association for folks who are not at Research One universities or who are not the major research institutions. The reality is most political science professors, most political science students are not at the major research universities. It's an empirical fact, and even if we all wanted to be at them, we could not be at them. Okay, so I think it's real good to have that space, and so this is a real nice opportunity for us to merge our passions, teaching and research. This conference brings both of those together. When we talk about things here at these panels, we want to see evidence. We want to see that. We apply the same rigor we have for our research to our teaching. We want to know if what we're doing is successful. As a discipline, like Fletcher said, I agree that there is more engagement in dialogue about teaching. We have our discussions about what best practices are. How can we test and support what we're doing when it comes to assessment? How is this going to work out? And this understanding that like the core curriculum classes in political science are a major part of what many of us do. How can we best reach out to folks? What are some things we can do so we can engage our young, well, not just young, but our students, because many of them, that's the only class they're going to take in political science. So I think that's a real important part, the benefits of our discipline from this. And then when it comes to individuals, it's really been an opportunity for many people to develop their careers and develop leadership opportunities. This conference has really provided an opportunity for folks to get engaged with the American Political Science Association. And so people who have been here at activist meetings feel a connection to the association. We all have different things that appeal to us, and our association needs to have opportunities and venues for political scientists with different interests to get involved, and this meeting has really been an opportunity for that. Again, some people pointed out that many of us are in leadership positions. And I can't speak for everybody here, but I think about myself, and I think about where I was 10 years ago. And I had just been gotten appointed as the co-director of the curriculum programs. I was still an associate professor. I hadn't been to an APSA meeting in several years. I got more involved with the association and started doing things, and lo and behold, I kept getting invited to do things and participate in things, and it's been a great opportunity for me to get involved with the APSA. If you had told me at that first meeting in that little room we were at the university that I would be on the APSA council one day, I would have laughed at you. Okay, I thought, what? I'd be happy to be in the Southwestern Political Science Association Executive Council. That was my goal. And then to get that was just amazing. And again, I look around this room and I see it full of folks who have become very involved with the discipline. So, to me, the real accomplishment here, it's a space for full of participation and a real reason for, another reason for folks to be involved with their profession and the American Political Science Association. Thanks.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's a real pleasure and honor to be here for the 10th anniversary of this conference. It's actually my favorite conference in the discipline, and I hope I can continue to go until I retire, and hopefully, I retire before the conference retires. But given that this is the 10th, I'm very optimistic that that will be the case. I wanted to start some observations here by citing from the APSA, for lack of a better term, mission statement. It says there, among other things, and I got that from the website, promoting high-quality teaching and education about politics and government is part of its core objectives. I think the TLC is without doubt the core of this particular core objective, because that is where the discussion about teaching and learning takes place. And I'll go into that in a little more in just a second. In part because it means that people make their teaching observations and practices public. Oftentimes it doesn't happen, at least in my department, it doesn't happen very often that we fess up to our problems in the classroom because, oh God, somebody might hear it and then you're in trouble if your classes don't go well and so forth. But it is a really important debate to see what works and what doesn't work in classrooms and how different classroom settings affect different teaching strategies. We do this with our research all the time. We make our research public. In this conference, we make our teaching public. And that, I think, is a very big contribution that the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning makes to the discipline and to teaching. The Scholarship of Teaching and Learning actually has a lot of different functions that I think are incredibly important. It provides leadership and political science education. That is particularly crucial, in my view, when higher education has come under severe attacks for all sorts of reasons. Occasionally you hear people wanting to cut NSF funding because their research is not considered to be sufficiently useful or whatever other reasons I mentioned. But the broad attack on higher education is because of the perceived lack of quality in teaching the students. This is where the real problem starts by higher education right now, I think, is on the defense, right? To illustrate, the symposium in the most recent issue of Political Science, PS Political Science and Politics, is labeled The Troubled Future of Colleges and Universities. It's a really interesting symposium, and if you haven't read it yet, go ahead and read it. It really has a lot of thought-provoking ideas in it. What I found one of the most interesting points that was being made is that this attack on higher education across all contributors for this specific symposium focused on teaching and learning, not so much on research. We have a little bit of a problem in our discipline to justify why we spend tax dollars in our research, but a much higher problem in justifying why we teach our students the way we do when legislatures, employers, sometimes parents don't think we do a really good job in doing that. So the problem then here is that higher education, as I said, is on the defensive, and in part because we can't demonstrate adequately and convincingly how we teach our students and why it's valuable and what we teach them. The Scholarship of Teaching and Learning goes a long way in making these connections. Okay. Gary King and May Sen, the special editors of the symposium, state that one of the forces that threaten the business model of higher education is constituted by some outdated methods of teaching and learning, and this is a quote, that have been unchanged for hundreds of years. At this conference, we talk about some of those methods that have been used for hundreds of years, but a lot of other things that are new and innovative. Active learning strategies, the use of technology in the classroom, face-to-face and online, simulations, new ways of engaging students, civic engagement, and so forth. These are not things that were taught hundreds and hundreds of years ago, and hundreds of years ago we didn't teach it in this fashion. So if you look for innovation in teaching, I think we can find it at this conference because it pulls people together who are passionate about doing this. They're thinking ahead, and they're rapidly adjusting to a changing demographic environment in our classrooms at all sorts of institutions of higher education. Okay. So the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning that has been produced for this conference has therefore a core role to play in providing guidance to improve teaching and learning and to overcome some of the boundaries that have been observed with these outdated methods of teaching and learning. Okay. That brings me to the next point. Within the discipline of political science, this conference is uniquely positioned, I think, to make a substantive contribution to this debate surrounding the attack on higher education in political science. Even though this particular criticism has been expressed for several years now, if you look at conferences in political science, and that includes the APSA annual meeting as much as other political science meetings, large and small. Consider this. The political science education, teaching and learning division for the 2012 APSA program for the annual meeting, which unfortunately was canceled, but the program is still available online, lists a total of 20 papers on teaching and learning, plus 8 poster sessions. That's 28 presentations on teaching and learning, one of the core issues in the debate in higher education right now. And this is not unusual for political science conferences, not just in the US, but also in other places in the world. Looking at the TLC here, I just sort of counted what was in the program. There were 170 presentations, papers, without the workshops on teaching and learning. So this is the place where this debate really takes place. And this is why I think this conference really has a core position in the association, but also in the discipline more generally. It is doubtful that this much research could have taken place and would be produced without this conference. You can make a simple institutional argument, right? If there are no institutional incentives or outlets for this kind of work, people will be less enticed to do it. But because we have a forum where faculty can present this type of work, there is an incentive to produce it. Okay, so therefore, and I'm coming to the end here, this conference is really crucial in the way our discipline engages or could engage with the attack on higher education by assessing strengths and weaknesses in our teaching and our students' learning, acknowledging the problems that exist and the weaknesses, and deliberate on ways to improve political science education. Okay, put simply, it would be very difficult to think about any other place where these discussions could take place. Then finally, I think the contribution of Scholarship of Teaching and Learning to the discipline has to do with some career development that some of you have addressed as well. We mentioned some publications already, this terrific new volume that Dick Simpson and Elizabeth Benyon and Alison McCartney, I think they all three here have produced, which is a really terrific contribution, and that just started out there hot off the press. The earlier book on assessment that Michelle and John and I did, but also a flow of manuscript that has been submitted to the Journal of Political Science Education that my colleague Hutch Pollack in the back there, Bruce Wilson, and I have started to edit since July of last year. If we look at the gender composition of people who submit to the journal, interestingly enough, 47% of the scholarship is written by women. Okay? This is much more than any other journal that I know of in terms of submissions. It is also more than the percentage of women in the discipline. So if you talk about diversity, right, the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning has a very important contribution to make here. Furthermore, 44% of all submissions have come from assistant professors. Going back to the point of why do we do it? Does it count for tenure and promotion? And I want to echo Henry Brady's, some of the president's comments in the special issue symposium, the symposium in TS here. Basically, he says, you know, maybe that marginal article that somebody has to get tenure is not as important as somebody coming to this conference and improving their teaching, because it affects a lot more people than an article that will never be cited. Okay? And that is Henry Brady's words, not mine. Now, with that, as a summary statement, I think the importance of the Teaching and Learning Conference really cannot be overstated for a lot of reasons. And I'm really, really thrilled that so many of you are willing to give up your weekend and spend your weekend here discussing how to improve teaching and learning. Thank you.
Well, a lot of the things have somewhat been said, and especially I think Kerstin and I have some similar thoughts, but I'm going to talk about assessment a little bit. I think that certainly the conference to me has functioned as a change agent, that the working group model, that structural element of the conference has been so successful for a number of reasons, one of which is that you get a much larger faculty development, I think, impact on a single sort of topic that you're passionate about. I also think you get the social engagement that a lot of people have been talking about, and there's an energy at this conference. There's a cohesion, an energy that just happens when you walk into the conference rooms, and I think that that has kind of carried over to the APSA annual meeting as well. I would be interested in how many people go to APSA more often now because of the people they've met here. For me, I wanted to talk a little bit about how this has affected the topic of assessment. And certainly we had a few conference, APSA annual meeting conference efforts to talk about assessment as a part of what we have to do. We had some pre-conference workshops, but generally there's not been that continuing focus that allowed us to really get some cumulative learning from the process. At TLC, we've had 1 to 3 tracks every year on assessment. And so you start to get a building of a lot of papers on this topic. The changing emphases have been interesting, not complete total shift, but certainly in the early years we were talking more about case studies, looking at course level assessment, focusing on knowledge and some skills. Attitudinally, you would get some resistance, papers, faculty who were arguing it was a fad, it would go away, shouldn't put too much effort into it, kind of a compliance approach. You did, though, even from the very beginning, have a few people there who were talking about what an incredible experience they'd had on their campus in their assessment efforts. So you always had a few of those people who were promoting assessment as something that really might not be too awful. More recently, it seems that we are focusing a lot more on the program level. How do we build successful curricula, not just have a successful course? That we are getting much more written that is quantitative, methodologically sound, publishable, looking beyond a single case, things that are generalizable. Certainly cases are still very important to what we hear at this track. Leadership is a key variable in whether or not assessment is successful on your campus, and I think it's important for us to hear how campuses have navigated this. There's a cultural dimension of assessment, and certainly we are trying to focus on more complex topics. So now we actually have people who are seriously trying to figure out how do you assess our curricular objectives in diversity or in citizenship. And that critical thinking. We realize now that these things are hard to assess. It's not something, these are concepts that are much more complex than we ever thought they were before we tried to assess them. So assessment is sort of hard, exciting, but one of the things I've really appreciated is that we are addressing it much more in its political context. And that I think certainly we have published the book. We are providing a lot more in the way of resources for our colleagues, but that the politics of assessment to me is where we are right now. And that because higher ed is under so much threat, that we have to figure out how to take assessment from defensive to offensive. And this is what the last few years of the track has really, I think, in an exciting way tried to address. We are in tough shape in higher education, to kind of repeat what Dr. Mansbridge said, and that I think we have to use our brains as a way to work our way through this. With the costs of higher education continually escalating, with international competition for academic results, and for all of us who work in public institutions where state budgets are under incredible threats, more and more money going to social services, less and less of the budget going to K through 12 and higher education. A lot more corporate and foundation involvement trying to tell us that we don't know what we're doing, that they have all the answers, and that we need to come up with an efficiency model for higher education. If we're going to place, if we're going to change this, if we're going to reframe it from an efficiency model to something else, we have to push back. And that the cost consciousness certainly is part of what we have to accept, but that we need to be pushing effectiveness. That efficiency without it, without effectiveness in generating student success is worthless. And that this is where I think assessment can really come into its own. And I guess at some level I would ask, what discipline is better positioned to take assessment and move it forward in this way than political science? You've got the political and economic dimensions of the topic. You've got a need for using mixed methodologies to push it forward in an effective way, something that we do all the time in our discipline. And we, better than others perhaps, understand the politics of it, and that we can be successful in pushing back. So that's where I'm excited for the conference to move.
So in light of this, if we're all in agreement that in the next 10 years we're facing some things, what does that mean for us as a discipline? And that's where I want to jump in. We've had some incredible successes this last 10 years, and I want to assure that we don't continue to fight the same battles over and over again. I think Fletcher's right. We've operated from an outsider mentality, and I think that mentality has to change. We've convinced people. We've made our case. We've sold the issue that teaching and learning is significant. And so now the question is, where do we go from here? And that's what I want to spend, I think, the 4 minutes I have focusing on that. So I can do it. As this radically changing landscape in higher ed, as we're negotiating, I think we have some areas as a discipline where we have advantages, and I think we have some disadvantages we're going to have to address. The first advantage is been our historic emphasis on civic engagement, service learning, experiential learning across all the various subfields. Even with people who weren't necessarily saying they were interested in teaching, many were doing this anyways, right? This has been going on for a long time. This allows us to demonstrate, I think, two things that are going to become increasingly important as we make our case. One is the ability of our discipline to convey proficiencies and practical skills to our students, and the second is that we have to make the case that we develop civic capacity, which is so important in a democratic system. And we have the ability to make that argument. The second thing I think we are well positioned to is, so our students don't grow up and all become political scientists, which is something, you know, the computer science department likes to remind us, at least on my campus, fairly regularly. But we do know that our students are well suited because of this background for a wide variety of professions, for a wide variety of advanced development and a wide variety of fields because of the skills they come out with, because of their engagement with critical thinking. So we're well positioned to be able to demonstrate that. The third thing is that now we have recognized the significance of teaching, and now our discipline, I believe, as a whole really has, not everyone, not everywhere, it's never going to happen, but as a whole we've embraced this. Our disadvantages, and there are quite a few. We did not, as Candy talked about, fully engage our considerable disciplinary academic skills in the area of assessment when we needed to. We didn't define the terrain when it was being defined, though we knew we needed to. And despite many warnings, we now have to navigate a terrain that others are setting up. I think we can still affect it, but that terrain has been set. We lost an opportunity. So the second thing is, as Kerstin talked about, we do not have the societal buy-in right now that we need to our value as a discipline and to our value as a society as a whole because of the things we emphasize and talk about, which in a democratic society is appalling. That's not a case we should have to make, but it is a case we have to make. We've not done that, and we need to. The third thing is, we're a discipline, and I know some of you have heard me say this over and over again, but we're a discipline without accreditation, and we are competing for resources with those who have that external leverage. We're at a disadvantage in our home institutions on this, and so we need to collectively find ways to help ourselves in that arena. And I think there are ways we can do it without becoming a, we're never going to be the kind of discipline where everybody does everything the same way. That's not possible, and neither do we want it. So we have to find ways to negotiate this one. And fourth, we as a discipline have not fully recognized the importance of the BA degree. And we've not put our full, as a discipline as a whole, and not put our investment into improving the BA as a societal mission. And I think it has to be. It's not just training those who are going to teach, it's training citizens, which is everybody, whether they go to college or not, I'd add. Okay, so collectively, what do we need to do? And I want to be very clear here when I say what is it APSA can do. As was said earlier, we are APSA. I'm not talking about the staff. I'm talking about us, all of us. What is it we can do to better navigate this new world? First of all, I think we have to redefine our understanding of political science and political science of education. I think it's more than just preparing people for the BA. I think it's more than the MA. I think it's more than the PhD. I think it's thinking about embracing practitioners, regardless of where their background in political science stopped or started. I think it's, and I'm not saying everybody does all of these things, but I think as a whole we have to see it as part of our big purpose. I think we need to think about those who choose to teach at community colleges as our fellow laborers, right, as our fellow colleagues. I'll go further. I think those who teach high school civics are right there with us too. I think we have to see our job in education is influencing and framing the discourse of politics in America. I think this is all what we're doing. It's part of our collective calling. We have to value it. We're all not going to do all of it, but I think we have to see it as part of our common endeavor. So I think that means working in some ways with teacher education in ways history and English have done very well for a long time, and we've ignored and neglected, and let people go out and teach American government courses who have no background whatsoever because we didn't step foot in that arena. And I know why we didn't, but I think we're going to have to. In a world that values data-driven decision-making, I think our discipline, we now need to think about how do we gather that data to make our case. And that means it requires a cultural shift among political scientists. It requires us to be more collaborative, more cross-institutional, and more transparent in sharing data with each other. We have to fill out the surveys they send us, right? We can't not fill out the surveys and then complain there's no data. We have to share data at the classroom level, the institutional level, the departmental level, and in our research. We've got to find ways to think beyond our individual work to see us as part of this larger collective enterprise. We don't know enough about ourselves and our work and our discipline to be able to make a compelling case to all these external audiences who are now demanding it. And I think we have to improve on that. So the last thing, we've got to continue our study of an improvement in the teaching and learning, but we also have to begin thinking about the creation and promulgation of resources for better political science education, even by those who aren't members of the organization. That I think if we think more broadly about all of this and how we contribute to that enterprise, we strengthen politics and the understanding of politics overall. And ultimately, to me, that's the purpose of the research. I mean, big picture, long term, not every individual project, but that's what we want, is a better democracy, a better understanding of how it works, and better equipped citizens. So my last point is this: as this world changes, I think we have a couple of options. We can do what we've done, I think, overall a lot for the last 20 years, which is hide our heads, pray it's just a passing fad, just as we did with assessment, or as I've been told so many times by more senior faculty members when I make these comments, is I'm just praying that I retire before that happens. All right. Those days are done. We can't do that. One, I've got another 30 years to go. I can't retire until I'm in my mid-70s. I mean, let's be honest. It's not going to happen. So for the sake of our discipline, for the sake of our students, for the sake of our work, and for the sake of our junior colleagues, that can no longer be our answer. I think we have to confront the reality that's coming to us and think, how can we not only manage this, but come out contributing more to a discipline that we've all dedicated our lives to. Thank you.
Thank you very much, panelists, for bringing us into this very insightful conversation on the future, the past, and the present of political science education and our role here as leaders in the discipline in shaping that future. Before you go on to your first track session, I'd like to just reiterate that the American Political Science Association is very proud that the latest book in the book series on the State of the Profession series is out and it's available. It's called Teaching Civic Engagement. The co-editors are here at the meeting, Dick Simpson, Elizabeth Binion, and Allison McCartney. If you'd stand real quickly just so people know who you are. If you, Thank you. So we're very excited about the book. There is a lot of literature on the table in the back about the book. There will also be two workshops with the co-editors. One is today at 3:45, and the second one is Saturday at 1:45. You can look on page 20 in your programs whenever you have a chance at the workshop listings. So as you know, when your track session is not in session, you have an open opportunity to go to a workshop. You have two of those opportunities. So check out the listings on page 20, make sure you know what you want to go to, and then when you're done, you can return your track. We will have coffee breaks throughout, and just one more encouragement, enjoy the meeting, enjoy your colleagues, and have fun. Thank you so much.